Hey guys, it's Kane here. Welcome to the channel. In this video I'm going to show you one of the most important components in Visual C#, that is called the grid view. The grid view is a fundamental component that allows us to customize a table design. This component displays the data in a customizable grid, and it is a very advanced tool to show the data. So to use the list view and its properties, we're going to create a class, and using this class we will structure our data. I already created this class inside the C#, so I'm going to start using this class in the form. So the class contains an ID, name and surname, and using this the add option inside your project folder, you can create other classes as you like. So to find the grid view on the toolbox, and you can drag and drop it into the form itself. By doing so, you can size it and you can customize it as you like. It is possible to change the colors, the size of the text and other features. So you can create your own data grid view as you like. I'm gonna name mine as my data grid view, and I'll keep using this name for this specific exercises. So whenever we need to load data into the grid view, we will have to use the people class that we already created. And in order to do that, I'm gonna use what I call as the binding list, which is going to contain the people, and then we'll create a new object of it. So through the people, we'll create a binding list named people list, and it will we'll use the data. We'll bind this data to the data source of the data grid view, and we'll use the features of it. So in order to do that, I'm going to create the form load, and in the form load we'll create people list.add and add a couple of people. The first person that I'm going to add is me. I'm just going to give the ID 1, name my name, and surname my surname. I'll also add 2 more people just to keep the data grid view with a couple of records. By default, when the data grid view starts, it will have a couple of resources. One of the most powerful features of DataGridView is actually the dataSource property. Using this dataSource property, it is possible to bind the data to a specific data source. This could be a database, a data table, or a class file, just like this one. So I put the names there, as you can see, and the next stage is to bind the data using the data source to the class itself. This is a powerful feature of the data grid view. We're gonna run the class now just to see the output. So as soon as you bind the data with the data source, it is possible to see all of this data in the data grid view. As you can see, all the data is being listed there. Now that we have done this part, we can go back to properties and change some of the features here. It is possible to change the text. It is possible to make the headers bold or a different color. It is possible to change the selection, multi-selection, or even make the data read only here. So all of these features are already existing inside the properties panel, just like the other form components. However, I believe, especially when you're going to use data grid view, some of these features should be set in the code so that the project itself will be more transferable. Now that I changed the font and everything, you can see that it's a different form now, and the headers are actually bold. So just to continue, we're gonna create the columns ID, and I'm just gonna make this specific column not visible. so that if you don't want to show a primary key to your user, you will learn how to hide it. All you have to do is to select the grid view columns, put the name there, visible and equals to false. This will make that specific column disappear, so that this time around you'll only see name and surname on the DataGrid view. There's a problem, however, that even if you change the colors of the DataGrid view, these colors themselves is like it will always highlight the very first component, and we'll actually need to fix that feature at a later stage. We can also make the DataGrid view read-only, and this will allow us to basically prevent the user from editing the data. Before that, I just made the full row select property of the DataGrid view, so that instead of clicking on the cells itself, the user have to cannot manually modify them, and it will be like if they click one of them, they will select the entire cell. So if I enable this feature, you can see that full row select will allow me to, just by clicking to one of them, it will select the entire row. We can still edit the data, so that is the next stage. We need to make sure that this data is not going to be editable. So currently I can double click and type some gibberish information there if I want to, and this is actually not a nice thing because I don't want my user base to go and change the data. So to prevent that feature, we'll make our DataGrid read-only. So put the read-only feature and true. We can also put prevent multiple selection. So just by putting on the read-only, you can see that I am double clicking, but none of these data is being changed. It's also a good practice to prevent multiple selection, so that the user base will be forced to select only one row at a time. So just because we have 3 records already, I am going to basically add an auto ID, so that whenever I add new records, it will start from the ID 4. This will give us some edge, so that we can keep increasing the auto ID as new records are being added. Just as I told you previously, the color property creates some problems, because even though the first record is not selected, it actually highlights it by default in the DataGrid view. So what I'm gonna do in here is that I'm gonna store the default colors, and then set the selection color to these default colors by the beginning, so that there won't be any highlight. So what I'm doing in here is that I'm gonna put the selection back color and the 4 color into the grid view data cell style, and selection back color and selection 4 color. So I already did the selection back color. Now I'm gonna do the front one. So that's gonna be the 4 color, default cell style, and a selection 4 color. Now that this is done, we can actually set the default cell style selection back color to the back color itself. So it's like the selection back color will be the default cell style back color. It takes some time to do this stuff, but I think it's necessary to make the program visually aesthetic. It's not something that you should do, or it's not a must, but it makes the program more stand out. So it is suggested, because your user base might be confused if you don't do that. They might assume that the first record is actually selected, which is not. So as you can see now, it's not highlighted. The first record, you don't see the blue highlight on them because we set up the colors to the default color. So now that this part is done, we can move on to the selection of the data, and this will allow us to basically show the components. One of the most important thing in here is that to basically find the event called cell click. If you actually double click on my DataGrid view, it doesn't generate this event. It generates something called cell content click, which we don't want right now. The one that I want to use is the cell click one, not the cell content click, because cell content click does not trigger some of these functionalities that I want to use, such as the color one. It just doesn't work, and then it just doesn't update instantly the default options. I think it does update the color, but it doesn't update the data to text view, which I'm gonna do it in a minute. So whenever I'm gonna click on the rows now, I want the data to be visible on a text box, so that I'll be able to edit it. So the first thing I'm doing in here is that I'm setting back the colors to the selection color, so that when you click on a specific row, it will actually highlight it. The back color was originally blue, and the fore color was the white. So whenever I click on them now, you will see that it highlights that specific row. The other thing that I'm gonna do in here is to basically select the first data, selected row 0, and then recognize this as people, so that we'll get the properties of the people. We can access the ID, name and surname of people just by doing so. So the selected row 0, data bound as people, will allow us to access to the state of the selected person. Another way to do this is actually using rows and cells. So just by checking if the selection is not null, you can use the DataGridView selected row 0, and using that you can access to select cell 0, cell 1 and cell 2. Now we need to set up the text boxes so that this data will be displayed there. So we can select the rows, but if we don't have the text boxes, we can't show them. So I need to create a couple of labels and text boxes to show the ID, name and the surname of each person. So just for the consistency purposes, I'm gonna set up the font the same as what I use with the DataGridView. I use Verdana of the 10 size. So I'm gonna do that for every single one of the components that I use in this exercise. You see, first thing I create is the ID, and I'm just gonna make this smaller because the ID is just a 1-digit number, and a name, and finally a surname. We need to of course change their names, so I'm gonna name the ID as TXT ID, the name as TXT name, and the surname as TXT surname. It takes some time to create the design, but I think it's crucial to keep your data organized. So right now I'm just setting up the names. I just want to show the surname for the label and set up the names for the text boxes. So that's gonna be TXT surname, that's gonna be TXT name, and the ID will be TXT ID. which I'm going to use them at the background. So what I'm going to do in here is that when the selected person is not null, we're going to select the txt ID, txt name, and txt surname. So all these features of the selected row, using the cells, we can assign them to the relevant text box. So as I click on them, all this data will actually appear there. Don't forget to make the ID not enabled, so enable equals to false, because the person who used this software, the user, shouldn't be able to change the ID. ID is our identifier, so whenever you do an update operation or a delete one, that is the one that we use to identify, so it should never ever change. Now that that part is done, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the selected rows, and I can access this using cells, or I can access it using the selected person dot ID or dot name or dot surname. It all depends which one you want to use. Both techniques are available and you can use whichever one you like. I see on the internet that the cell one is more popular, but I actually prefer accessing it through selected person dot the name of the component. That might be because I have an object-oriented programming background, but as I said, you pick up the one way you like the most. So in here I'm using the cells, so the 01 refers to the ID, the first one will be the name, and the second one is actually surname. And as you actually type these things, you'll see that their data will be visible. So we are approaching to the end now of this tutorial. So now that the cells are done, we're gonna make sure everything works right. So I'm gonna just click on the data and you'll see that everything now is complete. As I go browse the data, all this information is being displayed. The other way that you can do this is using the selected person and then typing the ID or name or surname, whichever one you like. So you can set this up, the txt name equals to selected person ID to string, and txt name text person name, and for the surname it's gonna be selected person dot surname to string. So basically the selected row cells, and this one does the same thing. And as I said, you can use whichever one you like. Now that I finished this part, I'm gonna stop in here. In the next video, I'm gonna show you the update, the delete, and also how we can add new records. So the application, as you can see, works now. So and we finished the part 1. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.